Okay, yes. All right, so, hi, everybody. Wow, what a nice crowd. My name is Marilyn London, and I am membership chairman and board member of the Friends of the Stirling Road Library. And on behalf of the Friends, I would like to welcome all of our friends and also a very special welcome to members of the JCC. And it's wonderful that we are continuing the partnership that we have had. And a very special welcome. I see that Ali Schrager, you're actually all Ali Schrager Speckler, but real Ali is there as well. So a very special welcome to you. And I'm glad that we are all together. This takes us back to our COVID days. And this also, Zoom takes us back to our COVID days. So we sort of know the drill and we'll do the best that we can today. I just want to ask you to please keep your computers on or your devices on mute. When it's time to speak, then please unmute yourself and then go back to mute so that we cut back on the on everything, on all the excess noise. Raise your hand when you want to speak. And then your hand will lower. This way we won't have everybody speaking at the same time, and try to keep it as some type of decorum. As you know, Lynda likes to have a book discussion, not a book review. So we are welcoming everybody's opinions when it's time for us to open it up. Before I hand it over to Lynda, for the members of the Stirling Road Library, I want to thank you on behalf of the members of the board and everybody for your support. It's because of you that we are able to have Lynda and all of our other wonderful facilitators. I hope you're all getting your newsletters. And what I'm going to just ask you to note is that on the newsletter and the calendar, Candy's movie on Monday is not on all of these publications. The movie will be called Next Goal Wins, and that will be the movie that Candy will be showing on the 25th, next Monday at 12:30. And since you're all on Zoom, and if you like to Zoom, Boccia's lecture tonight is all about the relationship between Picasso and Matisse. These are names we all know. Her lectures are phenomenal. If you never listen, treat yourself, register, it's not too late, and come on and join Boccia tonight. And you'll be very happy that you did. The only other thing I want to remind everybody is that on April 7th, will be another book fair at the library. So without further ado, we will all talk about Marsalis. I read the book a while ago, but I never forgot him. So we'll see what you take away from it. And I loved the book. So Lynda's going to make you love it. If you haven't read it yet, you're going to want to read it.
For sure. Okay. Thanks, Marilyn. Allie, where are you? The real Allie. Do you want to add greetings or anything? Is there something you wanted to say about anything upcoming at the J?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lynda. First of all, I just loving being the real Allie. It's too much. I'm so honored to share an identity with so many of you today. And yes, we're very happy to continue our relationship with Stirling Road Library and Friends of Stirling Road. We're so happy to be here all together today. And the one thing I did want to share is that we do have tomorrow evening, we have an in-person free book event with Lauren Belfer, and she will be discussing her newest novel, Ashton Hall. And it will be really nice to see some of you. If anyone is craving some in-person book discussion, please do join us for this free event tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock here at the J. I can put the registration into our little chat.
Right.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Great. How lucky we are that we have such amazing programming through the library and the J. And I really suggest to everybody, get on all the lists and find out what's going on in our community from both the J and the library. Okay, great. So I want to add my welcome, and this really is so poignant today because it is such a memory of what we used to do when we used to get to remember the days when we had almost 90 people during COVID, because nobody else had anything else to do, and so everybody was on book reviews. Today, I'm delighted to welcome you, and I just want to throw out there and to remind you some of the upcoming books for next month. And of course, Jackie's so great everything out to the J membership. She's sent this out to you, but for April, we have tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And Allie's got the list also that she can put up for our J members as library and J. April, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. May will be Horse by Geraldine Brooks. June, Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolito. July, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. August, The Chilbury Ladies Choir. And September, a book called Wayward. Okay, so we've looked up reviews on all these books, and they all have come with wonderful, wonderful reviews. So I think you're going to really enjoy the lineup. I want to share with you a little bit about the author of today's book. Before I do that, I do want to tell you that I have some video recommendations. It was going to be a little bit too challenging today to share screens. So I do have video recommendations, which I will give to Allie and to Jackie, and you guys can therefore receive them over email, and you can look at them yourselves. Wonderful ones about octopuses, and of course, a lovely one where you can meet the authors as well. So our author today is Shelby Van Pelt, who grew up in Tacoma. And as a child, her favorite place was the aquarium at the Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium. And she tells us that she used to sit for a long period of time in the dark at the aquarium, just staring at the jellyfish. She said she loved it because you felt like you were part of it instead of just looking at animals at the zoo in an enclosure. Looking at those jellyfish, you felt like it was so much more immersive. Today, she lives in the Midwest, but her story's heart is in the old aquarium where she grew up. She lives in Chicago, actually, with her husband and 2 children, but she tells us that the character of Tova was loosely modeled after her Swedish grandmother who lived next door and to whom she was very close. The author graduated from McKenna College. I guess it's called Claremont McKenna College. She studied politics, philosophy, and economics. And she says that when she looks back now about her grandmother, she realizes that she was what she called emotionally inscrutable. And in a way, that's really how she describes Tova. Whenever you'd ask her grandmother how everything was, her grandmother would say, oh, it's just fine, no matter what was happening around her. And we see that a lot in Tova. The author tells us that in 2015, she saw a video about an octopus that was trying to get out of his tank. And it stuck in her mind, and she began to research other octopus that had shown determination to outsmart their human captors. She kept hearing that voice in her head, a voice of what would be an octopus. It was kind of snarky and exasperated. And a short time later, she was taking a writing course, and the teacher told them that they had to write and had one assignment to write from an unusual point of view. And she decided to write from the point of view of an octopus. Now, at first, she wasn't worried at all that she was taking a creative risk by having a highly intelligent octopus as her narrator and protagonist, because honestly, she says she didn't think her work would ever get published. I wasn't thinking too hard about it, she thought. I mean, I don't even worry about if it's saleable. I never thought anybody would read it. But she kept toying with the character, and eventually she did see the potential for a novel. But she realized it would be very difficult to sustain it, an entire book with just an octopus's perspective. So she came up with the idea of Tova, the 70-year-old widow with a painful past who works as a cleaner in the aquarium. The story, of course, we know is set in a fictional town in the Pacific Northwest, similar to where she grew up. She says, although Tova is based on her grandmother, the hardest part for her writing the book was coming up with the human characters, much harder than developing the character of Marcellus. She tells us that when she started developing this story, she had this bond, Tova with Marcellus, the aquarium's resident giant Pacific octopus. And over the course of the narrative, we know Tova confides in Marcellus as she reflects on her past, She's tormented by her son's disappearance decades ago, and she's fretting about her uncertain future as an older woman living alone. Now, as their connection grows, she does help Marcellus find some freedom as he escapes from his tank each night to wander around the aquarium and feast on the inhabitants of the other exhibits. It is indeed a remarkable friendship. Ever the detective, Marcellus deduces what happened the night that her son disappeared. And now he's got to use every trick his old invertebrate body can muster to unearth the truth for her before it's too late. She tells us she wrote this whole story during the pandemic, and she's been asked, how did that affect her writing? And she says, there was a parallel here. Writing at a time when we were all stuck, the way Marcellus was stuck. We were looking out our windows, unable to go anywhere, not sure when we would ever get to go out again. And it was a difficult time. We were stuck. But she said on the flip side, writing during the pandemic, the big thing that came out was that in spite of the themes of grief and disconnection and being stuck, it turns out to be a pretty joyful story at the end. And the author says she's written other stories that were published by independent publishers, but she says, this was so heartwarming at the end, and she was so happy to give this ending during such a dark time. She said people said they really needed this uplifting balm for the soul type of story. What I thought was so interesting to share with you is that this book was an amazing success because people started coming into the bookstores asking, hey, do you have that book about an octopus? And booksellers knew exactly what they meant. Shelby Van Pelt's Remarkably Bright Creatures, a novel that featured this cranky, mischievous octopus. The surge in demand was unexpected because the novel came out months earlier and it sort of never died down. One bookseller said, I don't think the popularity is ever going to drop off because everybody who reads this book wants other people to read it. This is a universal recommendation, the bookseller said. No matter what a person is in the mood for, no matter what a person is going through, I can put this book in their hands and it will be a perfect choice. In an unpredictable retail environment where bestsellers are often created by social media, TikTok posts, Remarkably Bright Creatures is one of those increasingly rare success stories. It's a quiet, quirky literary debut that has been buoyed by bookseller love and word-of-mouth recommendations. To date, the novel has sold 1.4 million copies, an impressive feat for a debut that features an ornery octopus narrator. The staying power is what's remarkable. Typically, book sales are strongest in the weeks after publication when there's a blast of media attention and reviews, then it tapers off. But here, after a brief lull in the summer of 2022, sales for Remarkably Bright Creatures rebounded and then snowballed, launching it back onto the bestseller list in 2023. To date, there have been 28 printings of the novel. What's really nice, a lot of reviewers said, is we are back to the good old-fashioned word-of-mouth recommendations where your bookseller recommends the book or your friend tells you how great it is. And they're so happy that it isn't social media that's making this book so popular. So let's begin our discussion. And again, I really welcome everybody's participation. And here's a good general question, just answer very generally. What did you like about the book? I mean, why do you think this book was so wildly successful? What was it? Uh-oh, this is what I hate about Zoom. I see silence. Jackie, go for it.
Well, I just put in the chat that I actually loved it. It had a lot of message to it, but it didn't beat us to death with moral outrage, which a lot of our books do. I thought it was actually a hoot that they kept referring to her as elderly or old, and she actually did too. And then at the end of the book, you find out she's turning 70, so it puts all of our age into perspective. I absolutely love that they told part of it through his point of view. You're right, he was cranky and he was old, but he was very mischievous. I just thought it was one of the most fun reads we've had in a long time. I loved it.
Right, right.
Right.
I see all of it. So much fun watching your heads nodding. Everybody's nodding. Okay, what else you guys think? What did you love about it? What else? Why did every this book? Yeah, Meryl.
Yeah. I like Jackie. I loved it because I had seen that documentary, The Octopus Teacher, which maybe a lot of you had seen, and it showed just how sensitive and like misunderstood the octopus is. And so this book kind of carried that through, and it was an unusual read. It was something different. It felt like, it felt like you were excited to read it,
Right, right. It was such a feel good book, right? It was. Okay, what else? Well, yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah. Well, first of all, being an animal person, I love reading anything that's, positive as far as animals are concerned. One of my favorite books up until this time was The Art of Racing in the Rain. And
Right.
that was told through the point of view of a dog. And now I can say that this is right up there with that book. I just loved it. And I love the characters. I love Tova. She was great. She kept busy, which is what I do. And, talks to the animals, which is what I do.
Right.
And it just was it was a nice, happy book, especially when you got to the end. Well, partly.
Yes.
But, you read so many books now where they seem to feel you have to be a little depressed. And I didn't get that with this book. It was just a positive.
She did a
feeling.
great job of balancing the grief part with the humor part. Yeah, Rachel, did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to say I loved the book also. I loved the perspective, and I just loved how she described the person, Tova, how she described it. You felt she was in the room with you. You understood who she was by her actions and when she's with her friends. And it was just, besides a feel-good book, it was just something that, we need in today's world. There's just positive and care about each other for a change, instead of just saying, oh, just pigeonhole the labels of this is an octopus, this is a person. It is the interaction between us, the connection. We're all connected.
Right.
So it was
right. I think that's what made it so uplifting. You're right. The whole idea of the connections between us. So I think the author did a really good job of the setting, because can you picture how this small town on the water, the pier with the abandoned ticket booth, the grocery store, the friendships, the doctor's receptionist who, when she calls about her ankle, she says, Mrs. Sullivan, stay off your foot and no more mopping at the aquarium tonight. And Ethan is lecturing her when she's ringing her groceries. And she thinks to herself, does anyone in Sowell Bay know how to mind their own business? You can just picture this very small town kind of atmosphere. So right away, that's very, there's something very heartwarming about that. I want to ask you, in a larger level, in a larger way of looking at it, what would you say are some of the themes that the author wants to get across to us? So Rachel mentioned the whole idea of connection. I think that's a really important one. What else? What are the obvious themes in there? By the way, if there's a lull like this, go ahead and just talk out. Come, as if we were sitting together at the J or at the library.
Everyone has a story. Everyone has a story that's untold.
Story. Love, Davia. Absolutely. Right. What else?
Grief. The theme of grieving.
Grieving. Absolutely. Grief is a major part of it. What else?
Well, like grief, loss.
Loss.
There was a sense of loss.
Exactly.
Her husband, her son, his mother, his father.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, and I think what she was saying about the connection too, it's not just the connection necessarily between people, but of the ages, because she connected with every age, and I loved that.
Right, right.
And it's also about coping with the way things are, not the way you want it to be.
Such a good point. Yeah. And resilience too, right? Coping, the idea of the necessity to have resilience in this world because you don't know what's going to be handed to you, right?
Also, and caring.
caring for one another. That was
Caring
a
for one
theme
another.
throughout the book, the care that each character had for others. It
Yeah,
was beautiful.
beautiful.
And then
Any other comments
going
about
with
that?
and going along with what Tammy said, also the importance of friendships.
Absolutely. Friendship.
I was gonna say the same thing, the idea of community and friendships and support for whatever each one of them was going through in their lives at the same time.
Yeah, I think so. The whole idea of community support. Also, in that, Doris, is the whole idea of family too, right? The whole importance of family. So, what did you think of the author's style of writing? I mean, we talked about this, the idea of loving the first person chapters, right? Where Marcellus is talking directly to us. What else did you like about her style of writing? Yeah.
I have to say that I read the book more than a year ago, and I remember fragments. So I'm at a disadvantage here, but I'm enjoying listening.
Oh, good. Well, Claire, I'm sure it's going to all come back to you as we're talking. I think what I loved was he tells us from the very start that there's a plaque beside him that mentions his intellectual prowess, his penchant for cleverness, and the plaque says octopuses are remarkably bright creatures. So what does that tell us right away about this remarkable octopus?
That he can read.
Can read, right, exactly. We know that he can read. So the structure is great because we're able to hear from him first person. Now, with Tova, we don't learn first person. Lynda, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Oh.
I found it remarkable because this is not a book that I would have picked up from a review or description. I don't generally like fantasy. I don't like science fiction. I just wouldn't, and I just love the book. So her ability for me to suspend reality and just be taken. I mean, I was rooting for Marcellus the whole time. I kept saying, find the key, find the key, find the ring, find the driver's license. You know, like you do in a movie and say, no. I just found her ability to suck me in, who, you know, not that I'm a denier or anything, but this is not my usual book. And I loved it. I didn't want it to be over.
And you know what? You bring up such a good point about the idea of science fiction or magical realism or something. She says she wanted to avoid that. And for that reason, she purposely didn't have him talking. Rather, right. What's so amazing is how he has this very sophisticated internal dialogue. He's able to communicate.
His thought process.
His thought process, exactly. That's what we see that's amazing. Now with Tova, it's a more indirect way of learning about her. We have a third person narrator speaking here. Think about this. Think about one of these lines and see what it tells us. The smell of disinfectant triggers the memory of her husband dying in a hospital of cancer only a year ago. So here in the third person, what we're finding out about Tova, it's not told to us directly, but we're told to us indirectly that she's lost her husband a year ago, that he died of cancer, that it was really quite an awful memory for her. We also get the story of what happened to her too, when she goes at night and she's sitting there by the old dock and she's looking at that ticket booth. She's looking at the water, the night water, and she's allowing us to understand that something awful happened in that water. And we realize, of course, it has something to do with her son and what happened. I loved also the author's link. Remember one scene, just to refresh your memory. She's already, by accident, she ruins Ethan, and we're going to talk about the characters in a little bit, but she ruins Ethan's Grateful Dead t-shirt, which was one of his most prized possessions, remember? She grabs it, she wipes up red wine, no less, that's what she does, and it turns out it ruins it, and she's got to drive to Seattle, and she's going to be driving 3 hours on the freeway. She doesn't drive or on the freeway, but she does it to replace the t-shirt. And here's what the author says, quote, "The cars remind Tova of a school of feckless fish dodging a predator's attack, moving in unison, not realizing they're fleeing the shark on one side only to be devoured by the seal on the other. It's a great way of describing traffic, right?
Right.
This one. She's choosing which lane to go in. Remember, she's not used to driving on the freeway. She sees the cars moving at a clip in one and there's standstill at the other lane. And she and her husband always used to think that they chose the slowest lane at the checkout counter or at the bank. And I know that feeling, right? But she says, how odd such things can be. Each little decision about which lane to choose determines exactly how you get where you're going and when. She can't help but remember how she and Will had gone to the grocery store on the very day when Eric died, and she wondered if they'd picked the faster checkout lane that day, would they have arrived home in time to see Eric before he left for his job at the ferry dock? Would he have mentioned that he was seeing a girl? Would any of that changed anything? So you see how indirectly we're learning so many different things about that situation. I want to dig in now about Marcellus and talk about how she does it, the author. It's really quite amazing. What have we learned about Marcellus? What facts can you tell me about Marcellus? He can read, right? He was the manager of the aquarium by the little girl. His name is now Marcellus. What else do we know about him?
He's intelligent and he can think.
He can think. And I just, to your point, he's so smart. I love the way he says he knows why herring is the one fish given to all the other fish, because it's low cost. And he explains why he samples the fish around him. The sharks in the main tank are rewarded for their dullness with fresh grouper. I, on the other hand, am given defrosted herring, sometimes still partially frozen even. And that is why I must take matters into my own arms when I desire the sublime texture of fresh oyster, when I yearn to feel the sharp crack of my beak crushing a crab in its shell, when I crave the sweet, firm flesh of a sea cucumber. How great is that language, right? It's so descriptive. It's so funny. I love how he says that fish eggs are an ideal snack in terms of both gastronomical pleasure and nutritional value. So to your point about being intelligent, yes, he lets us know that quite clearly. Were you going to say
sorry. No, he also has like an emotional intelligence. He understands like people and bits and pieces of each character. And he's like this omniscient narrator that understands like a little bit about each character that's able him to put together this puzzle. Like, I didn't finish the book, but that's what I think is going to happen.
Okay. I think he's very compassionate.
Compassionate. He absolutely is. We know from everything that he does that he's got compassion, sensitivity, all of those things. We know also that he has got a short lifetime, right? He tells us that it's only going to be 4 years.
4 years.
4 years that he's going to live. He lets us know that he can survive 18 minutes outside of the tank. And he says a lot of these things with humor also. You know, he's got a dry sense of humor. And of course, he knows that if he stays out longer than 18 minutes, what happens?
Consequences. He faces the consequences.
And they are what?
Well, he won't be able to breathe or,
and he could
will
die.
die. Yes.
Die, exactly. He won't be, it's right. All of a sudden his color changes. His limbs move slowly. His mantle becomes heavy and it lolls towards the floor. He becomes in a haze. His flesh changes to a brownish gray. He can't feel any change of temperature and his tentacles lose all sensation. So he's in a bad way. So it's very important for him when he does his nightly walkabout that he get back to his tank in 18 minutes.
He strategizes how long it will take him, and it shows also his intelligence. But I'm just in the book I wanted to say that it was like peeling an onion, all the characters. You're not hit over the head like a Hollywood version of telling you who they are. You're finding out about them through their experiences, through their daily mundane lives, what they're doing. You find out their character. And it's a great way of storytelling, I think,
really
that
is.
it's through experience.
I love that idea of it like peeling an onion. That's absolutely right. And of course, later we're going to see how these characters interact and they meet each other's needs.
What
I
we
love the
really,
fact- yeah.
I'm sorry, what's fascinating is we're really educated by an octopus. I mean, he tells us, you know, about all the sea creatures. He also told us about one day he saw a gentleman and a son, and he says, that's not his son. He told us about genes. He told us he was observant. And even though he was a curmudgeon to some, you know, he had this ability to really notice things. Maybe he read the books in Terry's office. I mean, we never know how he got this intelligence. But the other thing about the author and how she wrote, I can't see who just said that, but you know, when she gave us a clue, it wasn't hitting you over the head. I found it fascinating, like when they were redoing the girl who was about to jump off the pier, and she all of a sudden said, boom, boom. Like it didn't strike you yet what that meant. Right. It wasn't like, oh yeah, you know, like it didn't tell you right away what that was getting into. And I found that really good. Like a movie might have said, okay, the end of the story, that's how he died. You know, and I like that about the writing. It still left it up to you to try to put the pieces together.
It did. And even at the end, she kind of gives you another thing where Avery, we're going to talk about that in a little more detail, but Avery says to her about boom, and she says, you know what, maybe the girl suffered from trauma, like an explosion.
Right.
So
Exactly.
she kind of leads you down a funny path there and then brings you back. So yeah. I love the part about,
Lynda, I just want to say one more thing about Marsalis. He was sensual. He touched Tova's arm. And even though it left marks, she liked it. You know, I'm sure she did. And then later on, she introduces the touch to Cameron, and you know, he touches his arm. I thought that was really interesting. And I guess I sort of hoped that maybe he would have gone into the tank with the new female, but it didn't get to that point.
Well, later on, though, I think, you know what, maybe it was from my octopus teacher, you know, that, by the way, I do highly recommend for everybody, because I did watch that after reading the book. But you see, they are more loners, the octopus. Generally, they're more loners, yeah. But you do wish for him that he would have that also. Okay, so what I also want to ask you now are some of the observations that he has are so great about humans. Well, first of all, how does he look at humans?
Mostly are imbeciles or idiots, except for you. And he includes Tova in that last group.
That last group, right. Okay. So what are his observations? How does he see things? Well, I love that he loves to play games with them. I thought it was really funny when he says, you know, the seahorses are spawning and all the people are going to want to come and see all the seahorses. He said, and then as an afterthought, they are going to come and they'll stop by to see him. And he says, he loves to do this. What he does is he unfurls his arms, sucker his tentacles to the glass, pull his mantle to the front of the tank, and stare into their eyes. And then what do? They call over their companions. Oh my God, come see this guy. Come see this guy. And as soon as his friends come, guess what? He jets behind his rock, leaving nothing but a whoosh of water. How predictable humans are. He loves to see their faces when he's no longer there. So
Lynda, you just reminded me of something so funny. My father was a practical joker, and he had a tavern, and he always had to take the animals that he brought home to my house. He had to bring them down there because my mother wouldn't allow them. So he brought a talking bird. I guess it was a toucan, and he had it in a cage, and he had a microphone attached to it. And when a customer came and was sitting there drinking, the bird would start to talk to him like, hi, buddy, how you doing? And the guy would get so excited, he called my father over, listen to this bird, he's talking to me. What did the bird do? Nothing.
I liked and you just reminded me of another thing that he did with Cameron. When she's introducing him to Cameron, what does he do? He goes ahead and he holds his hand, holds his arm,
Right.
and with his other arm wraps around and taps him on the other shoulder. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's sort of he's very playful with him as well, because he's got a great sense of humor. I love the fact that he the change in weather by looking at the change of clothing that people wore. And he always listened to the conversations and he thought they were so ridiculous. And I thought this was really funny. He says, people would always be saying, can you believe the weather we're having? He thought that was so strange because humans have walked on the earth for hundreds of millennia. One would think they would believe it already, what the weather is like. So he would listen to a lot of our idiomatic talk and he would find such humor in it. What else about him? The author imbues him with such humanity. When Tova describes to him how Eric's body was never found because probably nothing was left of him. And all of a sudden the author writes, the octopus averts his eye for a moment, as if accepting some measure of the culpability of his brethren for their position in the food chain. It's wonderful, right? Wonderful writing. Okay, the other thing I thought, he listens to humans and what they say that he thinks it's so ludicrous. He's heard them say, oh, what you don't know can't hurt you. Ignorance is bliss. And he thinks to himself, huh? For animals, ignorance is not bliss. In fact, it's very dangerous. And he says, think of the poor herring dropped into the tanks at night. It lacks any awareness of the shark lurking. Ask that herring whether what he doesn't know can hurt him. So I love his perspective on things. And of course, coming back to something one of you mentioned before, here he is. He's so perceptive. When he sees Cameron, he meets Cameron as the new replacement for Tova. He tells us, I am very observant, perhaps perceptive beyond the bounds of your comprehension. Thousands of genes mold an offspring's physical presentation, and many of those pathways are as clear to me as letters on a page to you. The gait, the heart-shaped dimple that is unusually low on each of their left cheeks. You would do well to believe me when I tell you this. The young male who has recently taken over sanitation duties is a direct descendant of the cleaning woman with the injured foot. So this goes back to all of your comments about how perceptive he was. Lynda, to your comment that he teaches us about genetics as well. Let's move on and talk a little bit about Tova, because she is a very interesting character. And Jackie, I agree with you. It was funny when they kept talking about how elderly she was, and in fact, she's 70. Okay, but what else do we know about her? She lives in this fictional town of Soul Bay. She's a cleaner at the aquarium. What else? What else? Yeah, Lynda, go. Oh, Tammy, go. Tammy, unmute yourself.
She's highly independent, very self-sufficient, very capable.
Very capable, very independent. Yeah, so much so.
But doesn't like technology. No, she didn't have a cell phone. She didn't have email. She didn't like driving. She was just very content in her life and her routine.
Right.
Nothing.
And she never watched any of the nonsense on TV. What else about her?
She's Swedish.
Swedish. Good. That's very important. Right.
She had this terrible thing happen in her life with losing her son, but she's not angry about it.
She's not angry about it.
She's not an angry person.
No.
She's like inquisitive. She still hasn't completely accepted it.
Yeah.
Like she still feels like there's some information that's unknown.
Yes, that's the thing that drives her the most, those unknown questions and unknown answers. Marilyn? Yeah.
In relating to that, I found her much more optimistic. Somebody who might have had to go through all of that darkness that she's gone through, yet she stays very, very optimistic and hopeful, which is very lovely.
The idea of having hope when you're in that kind of a position. Absolutely. I love
She also had a strong people liked her, basically. They wanted, even her friends wanted to dote on her, take care of her, and she wanted nothing of it. And she was kind of oblivious to the guy in the supermarket that really liked him. She,
Ethan.
Ethan. And she was just like, she was just like annoyed by people doting on her. Or, it was an annoyance to her, and she didn't get that Ethan really genuinely liked her,
Makes
for
you
her,
love her.
Yeah.
She also didn't want anybody to have to take care of her. And that was an important thing because she had no family. So she was concerned about what would happen to her if something did happen to her. And that's why she made the movement to go to the, I don't know what it was, a retirement place. And she makes that very clear that, she doesn't want to be a burden to anybody.
So she can't accept what Ethan really wants to offer her in the way of friendship, as you bring out, Rachel, and what you're saying also, even with her friends, she doesn't want to be a burden on them.
And she's a gutsy lady, Linda. She's a very gutsy lady. She was able to replace that shirt in spite of her inexperience in driving and going. You could see the loyalty and the caring, the commitment that this woman had to other people. So she really sets a wonderful example for everybody.
She does. She really does. What about her, that whole thing about her house? What did you make of that? I thought that was very poignant. What did you guys think about that? What was the importance of the house? What did that tell us about Tova?
Well, her grandfather or her father built it.
Grandfather.
Well, she said the great grandfather to Cameron. So, but she was very attached to the house and everything, and it was hard for her to let go, but she felt she had to.
What I thought was so moving about that is when, as you say about her, I guess it was her father, right, who built that house, and he built the playroom, and it was so special. And of course, what can't she get over? The one thing she can't get over, it ought to have been a grandchild's playroom. She can't get over the fact that she and Will never had grandchildren. She even saved Eric's toys. Remember his baby toys for future grandchildren. She is, the other thing we've got to talk about with her is how sensitive she is to animals. Not only to Marcellus. How about that other guy who steps into her life? Remember, he shows up at her screen door, gets in the door. The cat. Yes. So my take on that was, you see how she is just, she relates, some of you can probably relate to this. She relates almost more lovingly to the animals in her life than she can to the people. Yeah?
That's me.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we have some people that can maybe relate to that, right? Okay.
Definitely.
Definitely. I hear Leslie. Okay, good. Okay. So I love how she greets them every day. Hi, lovelies. Hi, dears. She says it to the bluegills and to the Japanese crabs. And then she gets to the wolf eels and she gives them a proper greeting. But she's not effusive with them because, after all, she just doesn't want to be rude. That tells a lot about her. What about the relationship she has with her brother, Lars? What she had with him? What does that tell us about Tova? Okay, well, I'm going to refresh your memory. Lars died. The lawyer tries to get in touch with her. With difficulty, he finds her through Ethan, the gossip at the grocery store, right? And Ethan tells him how to find her. And he comes and he says, listen, your brother died at Charter Village, which is the retirement home. And he left you as his main beneficiary. And, she's feeling a little bit upset about it. Later, she confides in Marcellus and says, my brother was like that. He made a lot of messes, and here's even his last one. I got to go clean up. I got to go drive an hour now to go clean up this last mess. So what do we learn about this relationship that she had with her brother? Yeah, go ahead, Meryl.
She didn't have a relationship with him. She, some people, they have a brother or sister. That doesn't mean that just blood, because you're blood, that you're so crazy about each other. And so she just thought she was somebody that was very practical, and he was more probably emotional. And so, that was her way of talking about him.
So to your point that he might have been a little more emotional, because it's interesting, they were close at one time. Do you remember that part in the book? They were close. And then she says, but the years fell away, they drifted apart. And she tells everybody that they were not close. But she does also let us know, the author lets us know, of course, that they had been close until after Eric died. No outward arguments, just, they never got past the idea that, oh yeah, we got to get together, but the years stretched into decades. And at one point, Lars says to her, and I think this is very telling, he says, listen, his wife was Denise at the time. She offered to be there if Tova ever needed to talk. And Lars says, it's not a crime for anyone to care about you. So in just the same way that she kind of, I think we're going to see where she sort of pulls away from her friends at the time and she's emotionally withdrawn, she almost did the same thing with Lars, it sounds like. Things changed after Eric died. And when I went back and reread the book for you guys over the last weekend, I realized one thing I had not picked up the first time around. When she goes and picks up the things, his remaining bathrobe or whatever else he had there, old photos, there's one photo that strikes her. And what she sees is it's Lars with Eric on a sailboat. And it was Lars who taught Eric to sail. It was Lars who taught him every solution to every improbable nautical scenario. So you see where this is something.
Yes, I think that's what happened is one of her coping mechanism after Eric died, she didn't want around her these close people, and she really didn't want to discuss them. And she felt if she got together with these people, they would want to help her get through it. And she did not want that. She wanted to do it on her own terms. And she let people drift away from her. She comes off without intending to, like aloof. And I think it was the coping mechanism for her with her friends and with everybody that she really didn't want to discuss it with them. They wanted to be there for her. And sometimes people feel rejected on the other side, and Lars thought, he doesn't want me, so he drifted apart. And right. I always felt bad for that relationship because it just drifted apart, not because of an argument. And that's right. So sad,
I think everybody grieves differently. I think everyone grieves differently. And her grief was very, very private and personal to her, that she wasn't going to be out there for everyone else. She didn't want everyone's help. She didn't want anyone to be part of her inner life and her inner feelings. And that was my take, that her grief was something that was for her personally.
Right. Pam, did you have your hand up? I can't see you on there. I think I saw a hand. Pam, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Right.
Okay. No, my hand wasn't up, but at some point, let's discuss the ring.
Okay, we're going to discuss the ring.
Wait, before we go on, can I say just one real quick thing? I think, Doris, you have a really good point about the private grief, but unfortunately what she did was she didn't really allow other people to grieve with her, to share their grief. And I thought that was one of the biggest learning arcs through the story, was she really did understand and learn that we are all in this together. And she began to share with other people. And I loved that. It made her realize that she didn't really have to be by herself. She chose to be by herself.
I agree with that.
And at the end, she really does realize that. I want to just point out one thing about her friends, the Nitwits, and I'm trying to find my notes to find exactly the lines, but it's very beautiful. That group got together 25 years ago. He died 30 years ago. And the reason that group got together, they were a bunch of knitting ladies, friends, 7 of them together. There's 4 left or whatever. but they got together to fill, and this was her language, and I'm trying to find it in my notes, but it was, the idea was they were trying to fill the empty void left from their children had grown up and moved on. And here she is. They were trying to get over those bittersweet feelings, kids growing up and leaving. For her, there were no bittersweet memories. For her, it was bitterness. It was bitterness. And she didn't have those she did not have that idea of kids leaving the house. That was the number one thing, and moving on and going on to college and whatnot. So that was the thing that I think was a takeaway with them. And also, it's not lost on her about what's the conversation all these women are having together. They're together. What are they always talking about?
Food.
Their children, their
grandchildren and children.
And they're
Pretty
aging.
much.
And so what's
Right.
happening? They get together for a luncheon. Why are they going to have a goodbye luncheon? Where's Marianne going?
To her children.
To her children. And Barb has got another, Barb's mother is going to be taking them in. The other
Right.
one already lives in the basement of her kids, daughter-in-law and son. All of them have children and grandchildren to take care of him. It's not lost on her that she doesn't have that. Yeah, Linda.
Well, one of the things that everybody has said, she's chosen to be that and withdraw. But one of the things that I think, as a Scandinavian person, I don't think, I think of that as a Stoic person, and her background might have been, you don't show that kind of emotion, and you don't get the softness and the hugs that a lot of us, are talking about, and the neediness. You're self-sufficient. I'm guessing at this, I don't know many Scandinavians, but I think that goes along with, the idea of not knowing how, not necessarily not wanting, but not knowing how to ask and need for the help and the compassion and the kindness.
And it's interesting, Linda, because she talks about that in one of the interviews, that her grandmother was not touchy-feely.
Right.
So absolutely, that's what she's conveying here also. Let's move on to Pam's thought, which was, let's talk about Marcellus and what he does. How do they answer each other's needs, Marcellus and Tova? So how do they do that? So, well, first of all, let's start. How does Tova answer his needs? Well, obviously what?
She cares about him.
She totally cares about him. And what does she do?
She talks to him.
And she lets him wander out. She
lets him wander out.
Approves him and helps him, to wander out.
What else?
Well, she saved his life when he was attached to those wires.
She does. She unplugs those cords and untangles him. What else? What else?
She's acting like a grandmother without knowing she really is a grandmother.
Acting towards Marcellus, and later on towards Cameron without realizing it, right? But also remember how Terry had a clamp on his desk, and what was his plan? He was going to lock up that gap. And what does she do?
Piece of wood. Yeah.
She throws it away. Exactly. So she really saves him that way. And I love this one line where she says, she doesn't like to shake hands with people. She shakes hands with the realtor when she sells the house. She didn't want to. She doesn't like it, she says. But of course, shaking hands with people she doesn't like, but shaking hands with an octopus, well, that's a different story. So that she does enjoy. They both enjoy this touch. As you guys pointed out. So she allows him his freedom, and she really respects him, and she really cares for him. So what else? What does he obviously do for her? What does he do for her? Pam, take it away. What's he do for her?
Well, he finds her son, puts them together, but I wanted just to go back to what Tova does for him in the end, that she allows him to return to where he was born, as opposed to having to die of however many hours he had left in that tank and be found dead.
That's the great
a beautiful, beautiful thing she did for him.
Exactly. So how do you explain their friendship? What draws them together? What's so similar about them? Where's this friendship coming from?
They're loners. Both of them are loners.
Both loners. What else? They both long for a confidant. They both need a deeper friendship, right?
Right.
He doesn't have anyone to, can't he communicate with any of the fish around him? I love it. Their neural systems are not as evolved as his, so he doesn't have anyone to talk to or even to communicate with. So certainly his physical limitations are such that he can't communicate with anyone. And what about with her? What? It's not physical limitations. What is it with her? Emotional limitations. Exactly.
Emotional.
So what I love this part, what do they have on each other? I love this thing. On Tova, she loses her balance on the stool, right? And he gets out of his tank and he comes over to her and she thinks he's leaving for good, that he's walking out the door. And she feels a sting at the thought that he's leaving and like not even saying goodbye. She feels like she doesn't want him to leave. He's not leaving. What is he actually bringing to her when that stool breaks? Do you remember the first thing he does? Rachel, what? Unmute yourself.
It was a tool or something
A
to
screw.
help. A
It was
screw. The screw
then-
that was missing. Yeah.
Finds it. So right away he finds that and he slips it right by her sneaker and by her toe, and then he goes right back to his tank. So we see also, let's see, it does cross her mind the idea in the very beginning of letting Marcellus escape. And she wonders, would it be a good thing to take him out there and let him at least see where then she wonders, well, that would be hurtful if you don't let him go. And then she thinks, maybe he could pay Eric a visit down so deep on the floor of Puget Sound. But of course, it's such an inappropriate thought. She doesn't want to think about it. But what about for Marcellus? How does he feel about her? How do we know how deeply he feels about her?
Well, he spends a lot of time finding things that her key and then, the ring, and he just is involved with her life. But I want to ask you one thing. Do you have any idea how big he actually is?
Yes, they say he was 60 pounds and gaining weight. I love this. They weigh him and they say, oh, he's 60 pounds. Oh my goodness, he's getting much bigger. He's 3 pounds bigger. It must be, and they realize it's from his late night snacks. So I guess we can all relate to that as well. Okay.
Because I know
And also-
she had trouble getting him into the, when she put him in the bucket.
Big guy.
Yeah, he was big, right?
And also how he crawled up her arm even on the first time. And, she did not have the instant urge, the knee-jerk reaction like, get my arm away, like Cameron did. Cameron, and thank God she was there when that happened, because he had the knee-jerk reaction, like, I got to get my arm away. And she was like, okay. And, even though he made the marks on her, you could feel the love that it didn't bother her. And her friends noticed and was like, oh my God, what happened here? And you got to, get it checked out by a doctor. And it was just, and she saw it right away from their first encounter.
So she kind of lies to her friends that it was caused by one of the machines or something. But in fact, you're right. She really enjoys that touch, and she loves the secret that she shares with him at night. The idea that she lets him have that freedom. I love the part about the key, because he knows he held a copy of it once when he was young before his capture. It was attached to a circular ring at the bottom of the sea, and he remembers a rubber sneaker that was there and a shoelace and plastic buttons from his shirt. All of these things were gathered together in a clump of rocks. And then he realizes it must belong to the one she mourns. Such are the secrets the sea holds. What I would not give to explore them again. If I could go back in time, I would collect all of it. The sneaker sole, the shoelace, the boots, the twin key. I would give it all to her. I am sorry for her loss. Returning the key is the least I can do. So you see this real love that he really has for her, this great affection. I love the idea too that he says, you know, he's heard people say, "Oh, my heart skipped a beat." He never understood that, because he has got 3 hearts, right?
Right.
One is an organ heart and 2 control his lungs and gill. But all of a sudden, when she falls off the stool, what does he find out? What happens to his organ heart? It actually stutters and skips a beat. So you see this affection that he's got for her. And of course, he's so frustrated because he cannot understand how they don't see the connection between the two of them. Lynda, were you going to say something?
I was. You know, we do know that he went out of his tank before she came, because Terry says he's always known. And the romantic person in me realizes that he has in his mind, he could have escaped. Once he and Tova had this thing, I think he had one last thing that he wanted to accomplish, and that was making the connection with her. And then when Cameron comes, making her know about her son and Cameron. And then he was able to, at least in his mind, know he had accomplished this big deal. And the ending in my heart, when she, you know, when he laid down next to the bones, I think it was, you know, I've accomplished a lot, and I touched, you know, I've touched souls, you know, his brilliant mind. And to me, I think that that's his countdown, and he accomplished his countdown. And he assured us, yes, I'm still going to die, but, you know, a happy ending.
That is what made it so beautiful. That is what made it so. I love the fact that he says, when he's so frustrated. He wants to make this connection. He realizes what? She needs to know the last name of Cameron.
Right.
He, of course, what does he do?
Steals the
license.
Steals the license, puts it where he knows Tova's going to go when she's cleaning, exactly, by the sea lion statue. And of course, we know that sea lion statue because in fact she had a photo of her son Eric straddling the sea lion. You remember that? Almost looking like a sea cowboy. And I love this line. She says, as a general rule, Marcellus likes holes. A hole at the top of his tank gives him freedom, but he does not want her to have a hole in her heart. He will do everything he can to help her fill it. And he's going to do it. And so how does he go ahead and how does he do it? He leaves the license there. And then ultimately, what else does he do?
Retrieves the ring that has her son's initials on it.
Exactly. That's exactly what he does. And yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that's one thing that they both have in common is going out of their comfort zone. Wolf Eel, for him to go into that tank to get the ring is almost equivalent to her getting on that highway and going to look for the shirt.
Yeah, it says so much about both of them, that idea of perseverance, right? And also doing it out of affection, doing it out of affection. And of course, with Ethan, it could later be love. We don't know, but she did it for Ethan. Exactly. I love that the idea how she confided in Marcellus. I love this one line also. She tells him little things about the birthmark that, you know, she had, and her son had drawn it on himself when he was little, the same birthmark. And of course, her frustration that everybody thinks it was suicide, but there's these unknown answers, and she cannot believe that it was suicide, and she tells him. But beyond that, she also confides something else in Marcellus that she's never told anybody else, and that is that she had a fight with him. She had a little argument with him, and that was that he and his friends were kicking a soccer ball in the house, and they knocked over one of her Dalla horses. Remember that? Right. And it broke, and she was upset with him. It was something her mother had brought from Sweden. And also he was upset with her because she forced him to job working in the ticket booth. And of course, she's thinking about that. So not only does she have grief, she has guilt. And she's also confiding all of this in Marcellus. And what's interesting at the end, when she thinks she's going to go to Charter Village, she goes to Will's headstone and she says to his headstone, Will, I got to tell you something. I'm selling the house. And it turns out that the same drive that drove her to tell Will is the same thing that makes her go to Marcellus to communicate, to notify the octopus of her plan to move to Charter Village. That's the relation. That's the closeness of the relationship that she develops. What's beautiful is the way the author talks about her grief and the depth of her grief. And especially because, as we talked about, those unknown answers. I want to move on and I want to talk about Cameron, because Cameron shares a lot of these same characteristics that we're finding in Marcellus and the same in Tova. That's what's really amazing about this peeling of the onion, as I think Rachel brought up, but what you're finding out about these characters. So what do we know about Cameron? Well, how do you want to describe him?
A caring person, very much involved, and
we're losing you. I think we froze. You're frozen there. Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in?
Well, he was considered kind of a loser. I mean, he was always making mistakes and making wrong choices and everything. He could never hold a job more than a few days. And so when he comes to the town that he is in, and he's got the job and he's holding on to it, it sort of strikes him as maybe something is going right. And then he meets Avery, and wow, that's another thing that's going right. And he likes Tova. And so, it's like a change for him, a positive change.
He's feeling so sorry for himself in the beginning. He can't get over the fact of what's his main problem. What do we know?
His mother abandoned him. He
was abandoned by his mother, who was a drug addict, Daphne. And of course, he's never met his father. And his main thing right now is he wants to find his father. He looked at the photo. He thinks his father is this rich guy, Simon Brinks. And he's got the ring and he's got the photo, and he's going to go after that guy in the photo. And his whole thing that held him back was the feeling of abandonment. And as you say, things are going really great for him when he gets to Soul Bay. He's got the relationship with Ethan. He's got Avery. He's got things. He's got the job. Everything is going well. And then he finally meets Simon. And what happens when he finally meets Simon? Remember his reaction? Well, what does he learn from Simon?
He's not his father.
Not his father. He was best friends with Daphne, just best friends. No way he was the father. He offers to take a cheek swab, right? So he finds out what about his mother from Simon? What does he find out about his mother?
First of all, that she's very bright and she thinks out of the box. She hides her brightness from the family. She's unusual, taking chances. So lots of good stuff.
He finally hears something.
She wasn't always a druggie.
She wasn't always a
druggie. She wasn't always
the bars. Her character.
That's right. All of a sudden, and he thinks to himself, "Oh my goodness, my mother wasn't so terrible." All of a sudden, it's a turnaround for him. So that's one thing. But the bad thing for him is that when he leaves Simon, he is going back into that horrible state of what he was in before. And all of a sudden he feels despair. This guy isn't his father. Ethan hasn't offered him the job, as a manager, and everything is going. And Avery at the same ghosting him. Why?
Her son doesn't give him the message.
The teenage son doesn't give the message that he actually stopped by to cancel the date. He thinks Avery is ghosting him. Everything is just falling apart for him. He's so upset. And that's when he throws the ring into the sand of the wolf eels. And fortunately, Marcellus comes to the rescue.
But Lynda, his whole scenario with the father fell apart. He couldn't hold on to this story. He had a whole fantasy about what had happened. So his idea of what was going to go on didn't happen. So he was returning to his old, and I found myself saying, no, turn that truck around, go back.
Turn it around. Exactly. And Tova tries to turn it around for him when he stops at the aquarium on his way back to Modesto. And
Right.
he's not going to hear it. And finally she says to him, you're not the kind to just quit this job and not do it properly. And ultimately he does realize that that's true. And he does end up coming back. I think another thing that the author wants to talk about is aging in this story. What's the difference between aging, or how do they handle it, Tova and Marcellus? Well, how about Marcellus? Yeah, Meryl, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Marcellus is counting the days. I mean, he's got the days every time. He's got 1,000 whatever minutes, whatever. So
yeah. For him, he knows his expiration date, right? He knows where he knows when he's going to die. He's counting the days, and he knows pretty much, he thinks, to die in the tank in which he has been imprisoned, right? And he makes it very clear he's had a set number of days of his sentence, and they're drawing to a close. Okay, but for Tova, it's less clear. So let's talk about how she's looking at aging. I took it to be very, very real. Did you? What struck you about the way she approached it?
She recognized that she couldn't care for herself as she becomes more and more infirm. So she was very realistic about what possibly was ahead for her. And she was going to plan for it. She wanted to make sure that that was taken care of.
Absolutely.
I found her very pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, very pragmatic. It's just a matter of time till she falls down the stairs or something like that. She's got to make a plan. Yeah. Lynda?
I think people talked her into that. I didn't think she was so infirm. And I think, she was stubborn. Everything she believed in, and, she got it into her head that maybe they're right. Maybe I will fall down the steps. Maybe I will need help. But I don't, as shown in the end, she made the decision to change her home and sell it. But look, she did everything the same way. 70, that's not infirm. That's not old. That's not incapable of doing everything she did before. So I think she was convinced into that. And then she realized that's not true.
Yeah. I love when you say that, because her friends all say to her, don't think about Charter Village. You could be with us. And why won't you give Ethan a chance? And listen to this line. After all, we're not that old, Tova. We still have good years ahead of us, decades even. 70 is the new 60.
We hear that too.
And she had a future now. With a grandson, her whole future changed.
Exactly.
Her whole perspective was different now.
Right. Yeah. But when she fell and hurt her leg, I think that was the thing that made her think, oh, this could happen to me, and I don't want to be, left alone, and I don't want to be burdened. So let me go to a place where they'll take care of me. And I want to ask you about how you felt about her foot. I didn't think it was a sprain or strain. What was she saying? A sprain? If you're in a cast or a boot like that for 6 weeks or whatever, that's usually a break. And I think she was lying about that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, she was trying to minimize everything, I think, that was wrong with her. But, even before she realizes about Cameron, what I loved about her was that here she's attached to this house, so attached to the house. She's up in the attic. And she's looking, and you're thinking, oh my God, she's going to have so much trouble, saying goodbye to this house. And what I love is that she's there and she thinks about the new family that's moving in. The realtor told her about the family, how they love the bones of the house. They're probably going to, do a whole renovation. But she hopes the family will grow, fill the house, bursting it from the seams, like the large clan from Ethan's unfulfilled dream. She hopes that they will they will have a wonderful time in that house. And I love this. Enough of allowing one single summer night in 1989 to shape every last aspect of her life. Enough searching for answers that no longer exist. she's through living with the ghosts in this house. Charter Village for her is going to be a new start. Even knowing what happened that night will not ever bring him back. And she finally comes to that conclusion. And of course, when she meets Cameron, she realizes it was and when she realizes also what Marcellus has done for her, it really makes a difference, right? What do you think was the turning point when she decides not to go to Charter Village? What's the turning point? Tammy?
I think the fact she now has a future. She was not focusing on what was ahead because she had nothing to look forward to. Now she has a grandson.
Right.
I felt that
agree.
was a turning point.
Yeah. Me too. She has a grandson now. It gives her a focus to her life, where she's going, what she has to do, and she has things to accomplish.
And she has a possible relationship with Ethan.
Yeah, I think all of these different things all of a sudden show her that she also, she actually has allowed in her friends. They all say, don't worry about being a burden. And they've all said that all along, and she's not been ready to accept it. But all of a sudden, she's ready to accept it. I made myself.
I think it's also that she's ready to accept connections. That she was so in her grief, in that groove, that she just went through her daily motions of the day without a fire, without anything, propelling her. It was just like going through the motions and stuck in that grief moment. And now blooming our potential of really strong connections. And it is true of everybody. We all, like I said earlier, we all need to connect. And now she is connecting on a deeper level with her friends.
Exactly.
It was more surface for her, and now it's a true connection.
Right. So we see this change in Tova. For her, friendship and grief were always interwoven. The grief she felt for her husband was straightforward. It's the grief that everyone goes through in life, because when you're older, people pass away. But she had that bigger grief, which was really the grief of the unknown, of her son who had disappeared, and she never had closure. And she can't move from it because she didn't know what happened. And part of what stops her from being able to know this fact is that she's so closed off, she's receded into her own life, unwilling to fully participate in her community. What's really interesting, though, when you think about it is, how does this thing get solved? How does she reach resolution? She opens herself up. She goes to that going away party with Mary for Marianne, and she's sitting next to, who's there with her? That Adam Wright, the guy she had run into before, the friend, right? And the friend gives her the name. She finds out the name Daphne Cassmore, right? So she's able to open herself up to new experiences, meeting new people. And when she becomes a participant in her social circle, she's rewarded with these additional facts that end up giving her closure. She opens up to her friends, and ultimately she's going to turn to them rather than move to the retirement home. It was really because she made these connections that she actually finds out exactly what happened. And of course, what's really beautiful, how it all comes together. We think that Avery, the girlfriend, is a secondary character, and she is, but she is a pivotal character. How is she a pivotal character?
When she's sitting at the pier with Tova and they're talking, and she said that she saved a girl's life, and it turns out that it was Daphne. It was Eric's mother.
And you realize that she says she tells Tova, the girl was rambling on and on. I tried to get her back to her car, but she kept rambling on and on about an accident and a boom. And of course, she thought it was relating to a trauma from an explosion. And of course, Tova's sitting there and she's hearing this. And what does it give Tova finally? What does that give her?
Closure.
Closure, because why? It's a picture of
It's an accident.
It's an
Exactly.
accident. What might have happened? It gives her the idea of what might have happened. And
With
finally,
Sarah.
she's able to have that closure. True, not true, who knows? But it is something. Pam?
Yeah, just a little aside in a way is the book was fascinating. I loved it. It is. It's one of the books that you read. But when you think about it, the contrivances, and we forgive them. The fact that Cameron ends up at the job, that Marcellus has so many days to live, that you meet that Daphne, that she finds out about Daphne. In other words, in a poor written book, we would just kind of like toss it aside and say, oh, she didn't work hard enough. But it was just how she got away with it, God knows, but she did.
Except
I'll
you
agree
have to,
with that, Linda.
but you have to remember, we suspended reality when we
Exactly.
realized
Yeah.
we were listening to an octopus talk.
Absolutely. Linda,
Yeah.
I have a question. What about that scene where they pick up the floorboard and they find that keeps replaying in my mind. What was the symbolism there of the figure that her son had patched up, had fixed up? I
Oh,
missed
that's
that.
so interesting. What do you guys think? What would be the symbol there? What do you think it was showing us?
Well, maybe she had this question about what happened to her son, and she also had a question about what happened to the sixth horse.
Yes.
And now she knows what happened to the sixth horse, that her son fixed it and he hid it, and she was able to find the answer.
Right. Interesting. Right. Thank you. Also, the idea this says a lot about him. It tells us a lot about Eric. He felt badly that it had happened. And of course, Cameron is able to give that closure to her. Yeah, Marilyn.
Based on some of the comments made by other people, I think that what the author was trying to say, that it was possible to find love and acceptance in the most unexpected and unusual places. And, you have to be open to it because you just never know what's around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, you just reminded me of a scenario, something that she talked about at one point when she was a little girl. She was coming on the boat. She was like 7, I think. And she's on the boat from Sweden with her parents. And they meet this guy. He's a card player, a magician. And he teaches her, expect the unexpected. Right. And in a way, that's really what this story is about. So we all really liked the last chapter, the end of the book. Did you like that? Okay. So looking at this, Tova and Cameron are living together in Tova's new luxurious condo, right? At first I was feeling very badly that she had sold the house. I thought that would have been perfect for Cameron to move into that house. But actually there was purpose for that because they now move into this condo. They're enjoying their time together. And Cameron has a good job, and he's going to go back to school and he's going to study engineering. And Jean is going to come visit, and Elizabeth and Brad, and everything is going to come together. His duffel was found. Remember that? His duffel was found.
Right.
Really good. And of course, it's beautiful at the end. She goes back to the pier and she looks out and she whispers to the bay, that the bay took both of them, her cherished son and an exceptional octopus, and she of course misses them both. But I really loved Marcellus's ending because he calls it day 1 of my freedom. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
He knows he has 1 or 2 days to enjoy the darkness of the deep sea. And he goes back, and I think I found this so touching also. He goes back to where, as a juvenile, he found the key, and he goes now to lie with the long disintegrated bones of the beloved son. For 4 years, he was held captive, and there wasn't a day when he didn't ruminate on his own death. And he was sure it was going to happen within the 4 walls of the tank. And he's so grateful to Tova, the person who he trusted not only his life to, but his death. And I love the way he summed it up. He says, humans, for the most part, you are dull and blundering, but occasionally you can be remarkably bright creatures.
Right.
Right? Great line. So I think one of the things that when we talk about themes in the book, I think one of the main thing was relationships and connections and how we can answer each other's needs. And that's really what goes on. And it is true. It only was the gift of her writing that enabled this book to be so successful, I think, because as you talk about, the idea of suspending reality, but the lessons that the book teaches are really quite beautiful. Any other thoughts that anyone wants to add? Anything we haven't discussed? No?
Another great book review, Lynda. Thank you so very
Joel
much.
did a
It's
great
a
job,
wonderful-
Linda.
Thanks,
A
Great
wonderful
job.
review.
Most
A
of all, I
wonderful
need to
review, Linda, for everybody.
Thank you. I need to thank you all because I really, these Zoom, now that we're doing live and Zoom, it's really, when we have a lot of people on Zoom, I always want to make sure everybody will participate, and you guys did a great job. So thank you so much.
You did a great job.
Forward to seeing you all now in April, right? The months are flying by. We'll look forward to that tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And I know we'll have another wonderful discussion. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks
Thank
to
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you,
Thank
Linda.
you so much.
You're
Bye-bye.
Is that going to be